Hi everybody, today we are going to explore the process of creating art and how we can learn from the mistakes we make along the way, okay? And for that we will need paper, pencil, eraser, sharpener, paint, water, something to mix the paint, cloth, brushes, and masking tape. Before we begin, let's quickly cover the basics of drawing the human figure, okay? The simplest way to start is with the stick figure. From there, you add two additional lines, one for the shoulders and one for the hips. Then you mark the knees and the elbows, and that's all. It's that simple. By building these basic shapes, you can create almost any human form. For our first exercise, we are going to create an image from imagination. It's going to be a man holding a bird. We start with the basic structure and then we'll build upon it to add volume. My concept for this piece is to have the background fading into the main figure, allowing the colors to merge. And I think it can look bold and dynamic. I hope you don't mind nudity because I believe it adds grace and vulnerability to the composition. You may have noticed that I'm introducing a lot of new things to this single exercise. We're working with a much larger paper, we are using acrylics, and we are embracing bolder colors. One thing to keep in mind when using acrylics is that it dries very quickly, okay? While there are ways to work with this issue, just remember that acrylics are faster drying, more challenging to blend, and messier than watercolors, but they are just perfect for this kind of composition, especially when painting larger canvases. Now we have our composition nearly finished. It is bold, it's colorful, it is exactly what I had in mind, but for some reason it simply doesn't quite work for me. I think it would have looked better if I had toned down the colors a bit. Okay, so let's try again. This time I'm drawing inspiration from the iconic album cover of Grace Jones. First, we analyze the overall flow of the image, then we build the stick figure based on that, and from there, we create the structure to play around it. For example, I'm going to play with the proportions as I think it can add a nice touch of grace. So I am using similar colors to the original piece because I want viewers to immediately recognize it. But once again, I think I used too much color. What works for a particular image won't necessarily work everywhere. So I could have focused more on the shape, as the bright colors have made it feel a little bit ethnic. So lesson learned. Okay, let's move on to another approach. Now let's use a stock image of a couple. And we will make an abstraction using natural colors, which will create some kind of hybrid composition. However, if we lean too heavily into realism, the figures can start looking awkward, even deformed. So it's all about balance. Too much realism and it gets a little bit disturbing, okay? Okay, so I could have left the couple as they were, but I wanted to make it bold and bright, almost like they were burning in love. So I decided to add a very vibrant background. Unfortunately, it became too messy. The main subject got simply lost. So, looking back, a pale or neutral background would have been much better. Okay, let's try again, this time with this beautiful lady. Once again, we sketch and we work on the shape, then we think about how to transform it. We know that a bold background won't work here, so we'll keep it simple with a soft pale color. This is another hybrid composition, an abstraction of the real image with realistic elements like the skin tones, the hair color, and shading. But once again, the same issue. When we get too close to realism, the figure can look a little bit distorted and it can get a little bit disturbing as well. So in this case, it might have been better to remove the color altogether for a simpler and more graceful result. Okay, let's try it once again. This time we are going to make something using this Fred Astaire photo as inspiration. We will start by defining the rhythm, then we move to the shapes, and once we have the basic figure, we can play around with the proportions. I'm going to exaggerate the size a bit for a playful effect. Here we've shifted the proportions, making it more abstract and less realistic. And I'm going to simplify the figure into a block of color to give it more playfulness and impact to it. So, yeah, it is nearly there, but we can definitely do better. So, for our sixth and final exercise, I'm going to work with this dancer here. We're going to use the same basic structure. We know by now that we don't want a bold background and we don't want overly realistic colors. So what matters most is that the shape stands out. So I have already transferred the sketch to the paper. I have already stained the background lightly, and now I am defining the shapes. And once it is done, I can start adding the details to bring the figure to life. But no more than that, just some very small details. So hybrid compositions work best when you know how to balance elements. Do you want it to be more realistic or more abstract? In this case, I've chosen abstraction. You can still recognize that this is a human who's floating, and that's enough. More detail would detract from the simplicity and would, spoil the whole thing. This hybrid composition works beautifully just as it is. I don't feel the need to add anything else. I hope you found this exercise useful, and here is how it looks on the wall. Let's recap our exercise and give some final thoughts. And I'd love to hear which version you prefer. And remember, don't get discouraged by mistakes. If something doesn't work right away, take a step back, look at it again, and figure out how you can improve it. Art is all about learning and refining. As always, keep on practicing, and thank you for joining us.